stuff.
Item 1, it's a meeting called to order by Public Work and Utility Committee. And item 2, welcome introduction and acknowledgement of the guests.
We've got Angel Gabo with AECom in the audience here.
Okay, and trustee White. All right. Item 3, roll call, please.
Hushain Zagami,
Here.
Nate Feeney. Nate, are you on?
He might be calling in right now. He's connect.
Yes.
I am here.
All right.
Wonderful. Louis Sorreo,
Here.
Roy Mumford,
Here.
Tom Hubbard.
Here.
Public comment, approval of, is there any comment, public comment?
No.
Okay. Item 4, approval of 3/14/22 Public Work and Utility Committee minutes. What's your wishes?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I have it. Thank you. Acknowledge work product transmittal. Acknowledge.
Move to acknowledge?
Yep.
Oh, motion to acknowledge. Second.
Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I have it. Thank you. Item referred to the committee by village board. We don't have anything. Education presentation and report. Weston Water Utility PFAS presentation. Yeah.
Oh, nice. All right. Good afternoon. So my name is Angel Jabot, and I'll go through a couple slides here for you today. We're going to go through and discuss the PFAS concerns right now for the Village of Weston, going through what the problem is, some short-term alternatives, long-term alternatives, the funding options that are currently out there in the state, and then a little bit on AECom qualifications so you know a little bit about us. To start with, like I said, my name is Angel Jabot. I'm a professional engineer. I sit in the AECom office in Stevens Point. I've been there for 20 years. In that time, I've focused on groundwater treatment, specifically for drinking water use, working on weird emerging contaminants from 1,4-dioxane perchlorate and now PFAS. I work on a international group within AECom focused on drinking water emerging contaminants with Chris Curran. Chris Curran is our PFAS expert within AECom, and he is part of the PFAS team. He's already chatted with him a little bit on a few things with Weston, on bench testing, a couple other items, and he's been helping. We had a question come up from Madison. They were concerned about how to discharge PFAS waste. Chris sent out an email. Within 24 hours, we had 5 very good technical responses that more than satisfied what we were looking for to provide guidance. We actually were able to connect with someone in AECom who is responsible for discharging waste and has already set up protocol for a number of things. So a lot of really good resources. Also listed there, Lynette is a geologist in AECom. She's been highly engaged in the state, looking at the regulatory environment and how things are progressing in the state. She's also well aware of sampling methods and how PFAS is sampled. Francesco, he is the treatability lab. He's the gentleman that actually makes sure that bench testing is conducted properly and meets our laboratory standards. And then non-Blaine Lee, she's an ion exchange expert. She's the newest one to our team. She joined AECom 6 months ago. She used to work for an ion exchange manufacturer. And so she came to AECom and brings in some of that experience when we need to know more about ion exchange. Just bring that up so you know that we have a lot of folks that help answer questions. In Wisconsin alone, there's 20 of us that focus on this. Over within national, there's over 200. So what is PFAS? You've probably already heard quite a bit, so I won't rehash too much. Just mention it is perfluorinated compounds. So it's that carbon and fluoride bond that is super strong. That's very challenging to break. It doesn't break naturally. So in order to break it, it requires a significant amount of power and energy that we just can't do economically. So our main method of removing it from water is absorption. So taking it out of the water stream and moving it into something that we can contain, which is usually an ion exchange or GAC media. PFAS are used in a large number of household products. You might know things like Scotchgard. You might Teflon, some of your wrappers that you see in food wrappers that you would see in fast food would use this because it keeps grease from getting through paper. Also, your microwave popcorn has perfluorinated compounds in it that helps prevent the grease inside the bag from getting out. So a lot of household products do have perfluorinated compounds. However, in drinking water, specifically, it's measured in very, very low amounts. We're measuring it down to parts per trillion. Most of the other compounds that we measure in your groundwater, such as iron and manganese, we're measuring in parts per million. So million, billion, and now trillion parts per trillion. And PFAS is considered a chronic health hazard. So consuming water with PFAS over a long period of time may increase your health risk. So that's just a little bit about PFAS. If you have more, there's so much information out there, you can find more, but getting into specifics for the village of Weston. So the recent round of PFAS sampling events resulted in 2 of the wells exceeding the Department of Health standard. There's 2 standards in the state. You may have heard of a 70 part per trillion standard that was set by the Department of Natural Resources. The Department of Natural Resources, if you get over 70 parts per trillion, they have different mechanisms that they can make a water utility take action. However, there's another level of regulatory standards set by the Department of Health. And the Department of Health has set a standard of 20 parts per trillion for PFAS, and then less than 1 for health index for PFAS. This is similar to what's happened in Minnesota. They've been dealing with a similar issue for a while where the regulatory agency and the Department of Health have different standards. And so how do you regulate that? And in their state, they're doing something similar where they can't necessarily regulate, but you have to be very forthcoming to your customers on what is in the water. And so in this case, if you exceed the Department of Health limit, you must send a public notice to all your customers saying that you do not recommend that they drink the water or that the water is not safe because it exceeds these standards as set by the Department of Health. So it's not some place where people want to be sending out a letter of that nature. You want to make sure that you're providing the best quality water to your customers. So as such, that's the current requirement. You don't have to stop sending the water, but you do have to let your customers know about the water quality and the water issue if your water does exceed the Department of Health limits.
So Angel, can I just jump in with a question? So
Yes.
there's the confusion that is out there that 20 parts per trillion is a recommended standard by the Department of Health Services in Wisconsin. And that was the recommended level that was sent to the Natural Resources Board for their hearing in, was that March or March?
No,
It might have been February even, I don't know. So whenever their hearing took place, and they deferred any action on that and thought that we should stay with the EPA's recommended level of 70 parts per trillion. So right now, Wisconsin has no Safe Drinking Water Act at maximum contaminant level standard, correct?
I believe they selected 70 to move forward, but
It's still, but the federal EPA still has not
true.
It's not established. So, okay, so, again, this is a very confusing topic for everybody, and I just want the committee to be aware of that, continue discussion on this.
So is your proposal is to bring the level to 20 or stay at 70, or what's your proposal here?
It's to get below the Department of Health standards, so
Right.
that you could send water out that meets that below 20 and below the health index of 1.
It's more expensive for operation.
Yes, it would be more expensive. Actually, right now, all of your wells would meet the Department of Natural Resources 70 parts per trillion standard. So all your wells do meet that standard, but they do not meet the more restrictive Department of Health standard.
Is there a European standard, and if so, are you familiar with it? Because I found that they tend to be ahead of us on these curves.
There's a lot of different standards in every state. So if you go to
I'm talking
different.
Europe, not the United States.
Oh, in Europe, there's actually different standards. The folks that are most ahead of us, in this would actually be Australia. They've been dealing with this longer for PFAS. And actually, Europe is a little bit behind the US in this case, which is unusual. Usually the Europeans are, like you said, they're a little ahead of us. But in this case, Australia and then the US and then Canada are probably the three to see. And then we're seeing more interest in our European counterparts. Switzerland's just now starting to look at it, not even, I'm just thinking of the folks we've chatted with recently. So it's not as aggressive.
And are they using 20, say, like Australia, Canada?
So Australia is they're not using 20. I'd have to look back and see, but I can get you that information if you'd like to see the comparison between the different states and federal requirements. I would say that 20 is fairly restrictive compared to some other states and what they've selected, but there are some states that have gone down even lower for specific compounds. And so, we say PFAS, but this is a whole range of compounds. In Wisconsin, they're looking at 33 different subcategories or types, speciation of PFAS compounds. And they keep seeing more.
Where does the 20 compare to what other states have established as standards?
I would say that we're fairly comparable to where we're looking at with Minnesota as far as standards on individual compounds. I would say the health index is a little interesting. Health index does not necessarily, I don't see that in a lot of other states. And that's basically trying to look at how close you are to the standard on each individual compound and coming up with a value. So that is a little bit more unique. And I'm trying to think, New Jersey is more restrictive than Wisconsin on a number of compounds. But I'd have to check back. I know folks like Lynette and Chris Kern, like I mentioned, they have a whole list of different states and where they're at.
Is it anticipated that the Department of Health and DNR is gonna correlate a number and maybe meet in the middle, like around 40, 50?
I wish I had a crystal ball to know where it's going. My guess is that it's gonna be, that there's this, right now, a struggle trying to get enough scientific data and get more research done to find out more what's happening. The more research people do, the more they find out what might be a good standard to set. And I would say right now, I would not anticipate anything changing significantly that would preclude you, that would say don't continue forward looking for a treatment option. So.
I don't know what the other committee members feel. I mean, one of my thoughts as I read through all this, I said, we're trying to decide if we should spend money to treat water to get to a standard that we don't know what the standard is.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more information you get from what are other people looking at as their threshold they're trying to hit, I think is kind of powerful information, right?
Yeah, and we've been through this with the other contaminants before too, where there's a desire to get to the lowest level that you can, or at least know where you're going. A lot of the treatment options that we look at will treat down to pretty much non-detect. And that's just a matter of the type of treatment it is.
And I'm glad you just said, because that was one of my follow-up questions. And then if we accept the proposal to get to this threshold, but then it moves to something lesser, or do we have flexibility, or are we boxed in?
I guess you're asking exactly the same questions that I guess we realize are out there, and my original position on this was, yes, we have a standard, right, or we have no established standard, so we're chasing some kind of a unknown right now. The normal protocol here would be that the US EPA comes down to the states with a recommended MCL. They're not there. I think they're supposed to make a recommendation this fall. Now, whether or not everybody goes along with that, I guess every state has the ability to make it more strict. We don't know what Wisconsin's gonna do. I think whatever research we're doing here to find what we need to do to fix well 4, we should be doing, because then we'll be able to react. I know we're in a position to react if we want to. But I guess I have some other things to comment about later when we talk about funding, but yes, every state it seems to be doing something different. I think that one of the reasons that's happening is because there's been no direction from the federal EPA on this yet.
Not only states, I mean, communities,
Well,
everybody's
down to all the
doing-
communities.
right, everybody's doing different things. Some don't wanna test until there's standards,
That's where I was.
Right.
2 months ago, I said, well, why would we sample if we don't have a standard? What are we gonna find? We know we're gonna find something.
It's like sometimes putting the cart in front of the horse, and what are you gonna do with the information you get,
Right. So therefore you see what a lot of the debate is right now and why certain communities doing things more aggressively, say, than others. There's a lot out there that aren't testing yet.
Well, I think we passed the stage of testing. She's talking about the design and bench testing to come with a solution. Can be designed to be flexible, to move it up and down for the treatment.
That's exactly what in general, when we do an alternatives analysis, we would look at, this is the size that we would get for this type of outcome. This is what we kind of expect for a capacity. So, in general, you don't know what your future influent concentration could be. It could go up, not knowing where it's coming from. So you want to make sure that you have some capacity there in case things change. It's similar to what we do if you had a VOC plume or another plume of something that may be coming in. And so when we do our alternatives analysis, we can look and say, well, if we go a little bigger, this is how much more conservative, levels you have, and this is how much more it costs. Or this is exactly where we think you need to be, the sweet spot, and we can give you some of those kind of expansion contraction ideas when you do the alternatives analysis. And that'll be after bench testing. That'll give you a better feel for what you can look at for long term. But getting ahead of ourselves, you guys are always, you're on the ball already. So I just wanted to mention, because I think it's important to know that, what does it mean by having wells 3 and 4 off? So that means that you only have wells 1, 5, and 6 serving the main zone, because take out well 2, that's serving just foremost. So without the carry well, serving carry. So without that well, you can kind of see that there's a few days in there where you just would not have enough capacity to serve your customers without having the additional flow from well 4. So looking in the past year, the last year, the one that's shown there, the limit or the max day was, I think, 2.63. In the past 5 years, you've had as high as 2.98. So it's not that last year was unusually high. You normally have a max day that may be above what you can provide from wells 1, 5, and 6. Yep.
Is that the obvious of people turn on their sprinklers?
It might be that you can notice it's just a couple days.
You could maybe reduce water usage at least for a year or two if you just limited sprinkling, right?
We could try to enforce or implement a irrigation.
I'm just saying,
Restriction.
if it was necessary, right? I'm guessing, you see that chart, you go July is your peak, right?
Right, I think we know that there's a lot of lawn irrigation that goes on in Weston because there's so much sandy soil, so
And
that's
that's,
always been the case.
and in those June dates, that might also correspond with water main flushing.
That too.
Yeah.
But then we're sacrificing one type of water quality for another, so.
Yeah. And then, to answer your question earlier, like looking at other states, I couldn't find Australia's. But like, California has 5 parts per trillion, Michigan's at 6, 6 and 8 for different compounds. State of Washington has a 9 and a 10. State of New York is at 10 for PFOA and PFAS. New Hampshire's at 12. New Jersey's at 14. Minnesota's at 15 parts per trillion. So there are states out there that have.
That makes me wonder if 20 is a good target.
Yeah. And then there's others that are higher still, you know.
That's not that's what my concern was.
Yeah, yes, Vermont and Maine are at 20, Oregon's at 30. And then yeah, Connecticut, Colorado, a couple others are at 70. So it's, long story short, it's all over the board. Some are pretty low and some are rather high.
So you talk about wastewater, how do you get rid of the waste? Is that being discharged to the wastewater treatment plant
So
and create another problem for those guys?
That's a question down the line. I think we're getting
What she was
off
talking
track
about,
here.
right?
Maybe we should.
yeah,
let her back
I'll
into-
get to that in just a second when we get to treatment, because I think it'll be clearer when we show the
Sure.
treatment stuff. So start with, we talked about short-term alternatives. So why do we have to have a short-term alternative? So long-term things, like if you wanted to design something now for future long-term, is just to let you know that we can't put something in for long-term right away. Most likely it's gonna be GAC, equipment supplies, 22 weeks out. We can't just go out and get equipment in and have it in by July for 20-year life. So we're looking at short-term alternatives. Also, while 7 and 8 won't be available for the summer, so another reason why something short-term is needed. And then also if we were doing long-term operations, just getting regulatory approvals from PSC for a long-term solution would probably be prohibitive. So we looked at 3 alternatives right now for short-term. So you mentioned demand reduction, doing some sort of public engagement or ordinance to reduce your water demands. But if it fails, if your levels get too low in your towers, someone's gonna start well 4 because that's the higher safety issue. Basically, if you don't have enough water in your system and you were to drop pressure, you would have to send out a public notice to all your customers, and you could bring a pressure drop in your system would be very bad if you ran out of water. So basically, running well 4 would be a better alternative if you met that high demand period and you didn't have enough water. So that would result in a notice to all your customers. However, if you're successful, then you don't have to worry about that for the year. There is a concern about running 3 wells at high capacity for that longer period of time. It's hard on the equipment, so you could see some issues with that. Another option is looking at blending. So we're looking at if we could bring in clean water from the other wells and blend them with well 4 water, because well 4 is really close. The problem is that some of the other wells have PFAS in them as well. And so the best we can do is a 50-50 blend. So if we did a 50-50 blend of water at well 4, that water coming from well 4 would be safe. So we don't have a little area with high PFAS and everyone else is good. Everyone would be getting water that's below the threshold. The problem is that our first round of blending review did not look very good. Water came back pretty quickly to the plant. And so we're looking at it some more, which is gonna mean more valve closures to get the water routed around so that we can have a good blend and not cycle the water back and end up with problematic areas. That will reduce fire flow capacity because we're gonna have those valves closed, and that's still under review. Last option, less of the 3, is short-term treatment. There is rental equipment that is available. Sounds like not a ton available, but there is one available that could treat well 4 with ion exchange. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is in a moment. And then to do that, we flush to waste. And then at the end, everything's done. We discard the media. So I talked a little bit about blending.
I had one quick, that well 4, if it had to go online, that wouldn't need a notice, so what if it's below 20, it was at 17?
It's
That
the
water?
health index is above 1. So even though it's below 17, there's a limit that they set for individual compounds. There's those 33 I mentioned, and not all 33 have limits, but some of them have limits. And so if you're close to the limit on multiple compounds, it dings you. So you get, I think PFOS, it was one of them that you guys were very high on. And so you're really close on a couple compounds, and so you end up over 1 on your health index. And in order to get below that, you have to blend the water. So yes, you would have to send that notice. This information details on blending, like I mentioned, the initial review was not, I was hoping to see something great like, oh, this is a slam dunk, no problem, but no, it's gonna be a little more challenging. We're doing the modeling review on that. There would be a new, yep.
That's one of the questions, I apologize. Is there any need to test more than once? In other words, is it pretty definitive that you pull a test on that day and that's pretty representative? Or does it make sense to look at, I mean, I don't know if this is seasonal for some reason or.
We just sampled again today, actually.
Yeah, in order to, how much effort is it to, because when you turn it on, you have to plan where you're gonna send the waste to.
Yeah, so we
blend it.
had, so yeah, we sampled today, but in order to do that, we had to pump we sampled all our wells, so we had to pump wells 3 and 4 to get our samples to the treatment plant. Then we pumped the treatment plant to sanitary, where we had to notify Red Mountain Metro and everything that we were gonna do that per the DNR request, that we couldn't pump it into the system or out into the yard anywhere. So that went to the sanitary, which goes to Red Mountain Metro.
Gotcha. I was just curious, did we tested, was it 2014 or 15 or something? And
Yeah,
and we, at that point, we
it was good then.
were good, right?
Yeah,
And
it
now
was
we're
good.
not good. And so I was curious as to,
That was the information collecting, sampling event for what they call unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. Number 4, I guess it was, or was it 3?
Yeah.
From the EPA. That's when they send out this list of compounds they wanna evaluate whether or not a maximum contaminant level should be established for. So we sampled, they got data, still waiting for direction from them. So any sampling that's been done since then has been strictly voluntary. And now I think the thing we've got put ourselves in though is now that we know that we have they know that we have a source or sources that have a higher PFAS and health index than is recommended, we could be required or asked to do quarterly sampling.
So with blending, just to note that would need a new raw water line from the distribution system. So I'm showing the one in dark blue that we're looking at now, hoping that that's gonna work a little better than the last one we were evaluating. We needed a few more valves, some control valves. So you can imagine that if this is the way to go, it's going to be something that has to be done very quickly to have it in place before June, to have DNR approval, to have the construction complete. And then lastly, to make sure we're gonna know what the water quality is. PFAS sampling takes quite a while to get back. So we would probably do fluoride tracing, which means we'd shut fluoride off at all the other wells. And this would be the only well with fluoride. And we can monitor how much fluoride's in the system and make sure it's not increasing, which would mean that the water's cycling back through the process. So that is probably the method that would be needed for this. And again, pretty short time frame to get everything done. Next one here, so this is the short-term treatment. So I wanted to explain a little bit about where we've done short-term treatment before. In New Jersey, we did a short-term process where we put in ion exchange. Ion exchange vessels are smaller and we can fit them in spaces better and we can get equipment faster. However, long-term GAC tends to be more cost-effective. And this is an example of like the alternatives analysis they went through to get through some of the evaluation, but I just wanted to show you what the equipment looks like. This is an example of what ion exchange equipment looks like. It's kind of short, it's a pressure tank. And then if you look above it, that's GAC equipment, much larger. And right now those are fairly challenging to get. So what's available right now is there is a rental equipment for 4 vessels that could treat between 700 minimum and up to 748 maximum, depending upon the loading rates we can get and our response from DNR and our bench test.
700 what?
Gallons per
Gallon?
minute, sorry, gallons per minute, yes. The rental cost is not too, it's reasonable, it's $5,200 per month, plus the mobilization fees. But the problem is media purchase tends to be rather expensive. Looking at maybe somewhere around 90,000, they don't know how much it would be to actually ship it to the site. They give us a cost for media, but not shipment yet. So we're waiting for more costs. Media disposal will be determined. So when everything's said and done, you have to pay to get rid of this. And that is where we want to make sure we're very careful about how we dispose of the media and where it goes, so you don't have long-term, we mitigate some long-term liability. The equipment will be housed in the existing treatment plant. And with this type of equipment, the well would have to operate continuously because ion exchange media does not like to start and stop. It must be run at a continuous rate. Starting and stopping the media can change the bed, it's just not good. We have requested quotes for short-term treatment equipment to find out exact costs and to meet regulatory requirements for posting contracts. Just a little bit about ion exchange. Basically, ion exchange removes all these good things, and it gets higher. Basically, as you go up, it's going to kick off other compounds as it starts preferentially removing PFAS. So if you are aware of the Central Sands region with Clover, Amherst, and Whiting, they all have nitrate treatment. If you look here, you've got nitrate. So it's similar to what they have for nitrate, but it's more selective. However, if you have nitrates or sulfates or other stuff in the water, it can change. So that's why we're doing bench testing, is to figure out what other stuff is in the water that might cause long-term issues. And then sometimes nitrate, if it gets too high in your source water and it collects, it can do what's called dumping. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen, that you don't have any weird water quality issues with your ion exchange treatment. So that's one thing we do in the bench testing. One thing to note is if you are aware of, like, if you have an at-home water softener, that's the opposite resin, opposite charged resin. It's removing this hardness from your water. This doesn't remove hardness. But at home, you can use salt to regenerate your water softener. These can't be regenerated. You wouldn't want to anyway, because then you have to do something with the PFAS water, and that's just not good. So these are just used to exhaustion, and then the solid media is removed and disposed, usually by incineration.
So you have manganese and iron, what about those?
Manganese and iron are less, so manganese and iron would not be removed in PFAS in that ion exchange media. Those would typically be removed by chlorination and then running it through an activated media like a pyrolusite, manganese green sand. And that backwash water, if it's done after PFAS removal treatment, would not have PFAS in it. If it's done before that time, it would have whatever's in the raw water in that backwash waste. Typically wastewater plants, they don't mind iron and manganese at all. It's PFAS that they just are kind of in the same boat as many other folks, just trying to figure out what to do next. So, but as far as iron and manganese treatment, wastewater disposals, typically not a concern for the iron and manganese in the water.
Well, I think that should be part of the design.
For well 3, it would be. Right now, I'm just looking at well 4 for a short-term treatment process. Like I mentioned, we only have capacity for between 400 and a little under 750, and that's the capacity of well 4, which has the least amount of PFAS and no iron and manganese to treat ahead of time. So it makes it a much faster short-term option than long-term treatment. So, but long-term treatment, you're correct. You'd want to see iron and manganese removal. It'll help protect your ion exchange media if you remove that before you get to that media for well 3. Well 4, I believe the iron and manganese was below detect. So well 4, Sternberg, is much better water quality than Mesker, which is well 3. So bench testing, just a little picture of what it looks like. So I mentioned we're gonna run the water through tests. So we'll do a full water sampling test that'll give us the information for ion exchange. The other option is GAC, and we run it through these little columns here, which you can kind of see on the screen. So I won't go through, there's a lot of data, I won't go through it too much, but just know that. So I mentioned how much it takes to actually destroy. So we're absorbing this PFAS onto carbon or onto ion exchange media to actually destroy it. You can see this little tank here. We have 2 specialized plates that they put in the tank, and then they add electricity to the tank. And then you can watch the color change. And the PFAS is quite literally the fluoride carbon bond is severed, but it takes a lot of energy in a little container. So you can imagine it's not really suitable for a large volume. But there are methods that they're developing to actually destroy the compounds. I just realized how hard it is to destroy. That's kind of the reason why I put that in there. Just a little bit else on some of our equipment that we have in the lab to do the tests. So long-term treatment options. So that's the short term. So that would be the goal to get you through the summer. Then the next step is what are you doing long-term? This week, the well 7 and 8 new well and building will be open. The bids will be open on Wednesday. And we're looking hopefully to see some great bids come in, a lot of activity, a lot of interest. The idea here would be that those 2 new wells will hopefully get you some additional capacity short term. Another option would be that you could construct a new well to replace wells 3 and 4 long term if that was the choice. There's no guarantee that any well you select anywhere will not have PFAS. That's one reason why with well 7 and 8 we will be testing. And then of course well capacity can be challenging. I'll talk about more of that in a second. And then long-term treatment I mentioned, iron, GAC and ion exchange, and then iron and manganese removal. In all these cases, we'd want to bench test to develop the costs, look at alternatives analysis and do some funding review. Again, I talked about alternatives analysis, and just to make sure you understand, we're looking at both cost, life cycle, capital cost, and then also things such as how is it constructible, what sort of treatment performance you're going to get in different non-cost factors. So I already talked about pilot testing, well 4, then well 7 and 8, like I mentioned, it's heading to bid right now on Wednesday opening. It'll be well 7 and 8 should be constructed this summer. They'll be tested for PFAS. And then after we get PFAS results back that are favorable, we'll start construction on the well building. The wells are hopefully going to be ready by May of 2023 to provide water to the system. So by this time next year, you should not be looking at a summer of concern. You should have that additional water supply available. We are anticipating that some other portions of the well may go beyond that. Currently, there's some sourcing issues with generators that may, the generator may not be in the building before May comes next year because of some of the supply chain issues. But we're tracking that, and hopefully when we get the successful bidder, we can make some good schedule plans. Wells 3 and 4 treatment, they supply roughly a little over 1,500 gallons per minute. The idea for the treatment long-term is to reuse the structures to the extent possible. This is a picture of Mesca right here, trying to find a way to put iron and manganese inside the facility there would be preferable if possible. And then the existing GAC or ion exchange, existing water treatment plant. The existing plant was designed for GAC vessels, some tall vessels, so it should be pretty reasonable to get those new vessels in there. We would have to move chemical feed systems, and we would remove the air stripper for PFAS. We would incorporate the iron and manganese, and one item to note is that we probably have to chlorinate and then dechlorinate before PFAS treatment, just because both GAC and ion exchange, they do not like chlorine at all. Oh, and I should mention, this is a picture of the treatment plant. So you can see this tall area here is actually the area that was originally designed for GAC vessels and has enough head capacity for that. So on to funding. The good news is that there is funding out there. Safe Drinking Water Loan Program is available. We have to get cost estimates and an intent to apply. The ITA is intent to apply, and PERF is the project evaluation and ranking forms completed by October 31st. This is low interest loans and principal forgiveness. I bring this up because of special funding options here. The requirements for this are disadvantaged business, wage rates, and then Buy American, which means that we would have to be careful with where we're getting our materials from and make sure they're all American-made materials. I just finished helping the Village of Clover with their safe drinking water loan, and I've done a number in the past. The reason why this is really interesting is right now the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act has put a lot more money into this program. And so the money we're talking about is for transportation as well as water. So even bridges, and you might hear some comm companies are excited because they can get communication lines run in rural areas with some grants from this as well. But looking at water specifically, let's skip ahead a little bit. I can't really see the numbers. It's like 40 million, 10 billion area in collective funding to support projects that address emerging contaminants for PFAS. So 10 billion here. Of that, talking with DNR, they're looking at getting $13 million into their program for safe drinking water loan funds, specifically for PFAS treatment. Of that, they're also talking 13 million for the general fund for the safe drinking water loan program. And, you know, these are still kind of in the works. They're trying to still figure out, I think, the last bits of how everything's going to shake out, but that's per year for 5 years. So looking at when funding might occur, my guess is there's going to be a number of utilities that want to get into the mix. However, there's going to be multiple years of opportunity to be part of that program to get funding. This is funding for your capital costs, so funding for your equipment. This would not fund your long-term operational costs, which can be kind of high because you have to replace that media every so often when it gets exhausted, and you have to dispose of that media. So those are the things you have to weigh, and that's what we'll put in the alternative analysis. Other things to note is that you can stack interest. So if let's say we don't get where we want on the safe drinking water loan program, there's other ways we can do to get funding for this. There's an example, I don't know if you have this in your packet, but we'll come around so you can see this. But basically, if you show that now that you remove the water, the PFAS from the water, it's also not going to the wastewater plant. So now you can take credit for the fact that it's staying out of the river. And so then you can get yet different funding for those different ones. So you can get that for, here's some examples. You can do the revolving fund, which would be our safe drinking water loan fund. You can look at technical assistance grants specifically, and then you could also look at ecosystem restoration grants and monies. So there's lots of different options. In this case, this utility was looking at doing a number of different grants over time to try to meet their funding goals. And part of that program, just so you're aware, is that for selection process, engineering is based on qualifications. So you don't, just so you know that basically it's a qualifications-based selection process. So I put our qualifications in there, so hopefully you feel comfortable. And if you have questions, you can ask and feel comfortable, and hopefully we'll be able to get you what you need within a timely frame. So there's information there on where we've done work all over the US, the type of work we've done. So we do work as far as finding the sources where things are going. We help regulators as far as developing different regulatory frameworks, doing research for, such as you saw the defluoral little tank that's actually destroying the PFAS, doing that sort of research, and then of course doing treatment and water system help. We also do public outreach and communications. This is a list of our plants. There's 20 plants listed that are potable water plants where we're serving them, helping them with drinking water. This is our PFAS projects in Wisconsin. We have not done a drinking water treatment process for PFAS in Wisconsin. We've done lots of other processes, but this is our PFAS work related to dewatering other areas, sampling different sites or sources. And when I mean sample, it's not like just a one-off sample. It's usually a pretty substantial sample at that location. All of our little onesie twosie samples aren't shown on here. It's more robust sampling programs. And then for drinking water, these are the utilities I've worked with in the past 2 years. So I've been working with Weston on the master plan, and then a number of other utilities in the past 2 years I've been supporting in different ways. So I'm aware of the market and PSC and some of those excitement things. I do mention an optional item is that if there's a desire to have any support for any of your communications programs or any of your communications needs, please let us know. That is another way that we can support our clients and customers. Lots of really great people that do, this is an example of our virtual platform that someone could come in during a virtual open house, click through items, find information, see videos, and learn more about what's going on in the community. So a lot of stuff. Hopefully we answered a lot of the questions as we went through, but I'll just pass this back to you.
Yes.
So with respect to the funding, we were sent an email by Kyle Burton of the Wisconsin DNR on Thursday, late afternoon, and said that through the programmatic and congressionally directed appropriation process, I guess, sounds to me like some discretionary money, our elected officials in Congress have can apply for funding for fiscal year 2023. So received this on Thursday afternoon, and then also understand that the application deadline was Sunday, April 10th at midnight Eastern Standard Time. So we threw together an application and submitted it last night for, I threw $1 million in there, I guess, and with some information relative to this project. They said, well, if you don't know things, then put unknown, unsure. So they acknowledged receipt of this application. I guess we'll see where it goes. I don't know. I still don't have a time frame as to when we may hear about it. But I guess I also, in supplying background information, realized that we're chasing a number that is not recommended by the EPA, 20 parts per trillion. I'm sure that'll come out in this whole discussion, but I guess part of this is, and I'm thinking that, okay, the result of this may have some, may be telling in terms of how the federal EPA and the DNR are looking at this, and, you know, whether funding would be even entertained by the federal EPA, and, you know, are thinking that, are we chasing the right number? I guess we can certainly see what happens. Certainly there's no guarantee we'd get any funding, but I do think we should be continuing our efforts to find out what's the way to treat this particular contaminant and what we may need to do long term. So I guess just a point of information. If we learn more about this, we'll certainly keep you informed.
Okay. Anybody have a question? Thank you very much. Okay, resolution and ordinance done. Staff report. CIP update, Michael?
Yeah, I guess the main item of note is we were notified that we received a grant from the local road improvement program for the reconstruction of Weston Avenue, which is a joint project with the Village of Rothschild from Alderson Street to Birch Street. So we'll be, I guess, working with Rothschild on that to get the final design and kind of construction agreement together between our communities. I believe we initially talked of that being like a 2024 kind of timeframe project. So we did get, I think it was about 733,000 for that project.
How much is that? That's what, about a mile road?
It's a half mile.
Half a mile?
Yep.
And why price is so high?
The cost of everything seems to be a little higher right now. You know, I mean, the roadway, you know, the preliminary design is just a 2-lane road with a multi-use path. I mean, it's nothing, you know, it's not a 4-lane highway. Yeah.
Yes, but I'm wondering why it's so high. It's just the estimate at this time, right?
Yeah, I mean, so we got 50%. So I mean, the estimate was, you know, just shy of 1.5 million. So 733 is half of it. I get my number. Yeah, we got 733. So double that. That was the total estimated cost for the roadway.
1.4 million.
Yeah. I mean, it is heavy clay soil, so I think there's some extra excavation work to dig out the bad soils and, you know, use fabric, breaker run and base to kind of build that back up. So it is a longer term road. But at the end of the day, you know, if the project costs come in less, that's great. The grant is still, you know, so when you apply for the grants, you know, you can't ask for more money, but if your estimate ends up being high, they usually don't, you know, take money away from you either. So, you know, we can get up to 90% of the project cost covered by the grant. So if somehow the project comes in at 1 million instead of 1.4 million, we can still use the full 733 to pay for the grant. They don't take it away, but if the project came in at 2 million, now we have, you know, less money there for the total project cost, so. But on the, I guess, flip side on that, we did not then get grants for the 2 Ross Avenue projects, the one with Schofield between Metro and Alderson Street, nor the one with the town of Weston from Riverbend out to Paul's, kind of past Mock Miller Park. So we'd be looking to resubmit those projects as part of the I guess, STP urban program through the bipartisan infrastructure law for the 23 through fiscal year 23 through 26 program cycle. And those applications are due, I believe it's June 3rd. So a little less than 2 months from now. And then along with that, we'd likely include Schofield Avenue from Normandy to Birch Street. So be looking to put 3 grant applications together for that June 3rd date. And I guess the Apache Lane project got started last week. They're about a quarter of the way done with the sanitary main, and I'll be sending out weekly email updates, and I have the committee and the board included on those in case you're curious on the status of that project. And then for Northwestern Avenue, we did submit a grant on April 1st for the fiscal year 2022 funding. And that is strictly repaving the road from just west of Camp Phillips Road out to the city of Wausau, kind of village limits. So I guess the hope is I don't believe there's a lot of communities that were able to submit anything just due to the tight time frame and the limited kind of scope of a project. So we should be finding out if we received any grant funding for that project around May 1st. So, and then that would be a repaving project for 2023 next year. And then Angel touched on well 7 and 8. That bid opening is this coming Wednesday. And we did apply for the safe drinking water loan as we were submitting that project too. So I guess that was maybe the highlights of the capital projects we have going on right now. Any questions?
Real quick, as far as Crestwood Acres, do you know when they will start with tree replacement or anything like that?
I'll have to,
Approximately.
I don't know off the top of my head right now. I believe the order was placed either last week or 2 weeks ago. And
Generally, that would be like a springtime.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we still have a final walkthrough to do on that. I know there's a couple concrete approaches that have cracks in them and other restoration kind of cleanup items. But kind of, we're waiting for winter to finally leave so we can see how things went. But I think during the spring melt, everything, you know, the drainage and everything we put in there seemed to work pretty well. I don't know, living there, I don't know if you noticed any difference, but
Yes.
all right. So I guess that's it's a good thing. I didn't have anybody calling me saying, you guys messed everything up, now I have this big problem. And I used to have no problem or a little problem, so, okay. Well, good.
Anything else? Anybody else have questions? Okay. Street operation?
Yeah, we're praying for winter to end. We'll see what this week brings. They're talking 25 for a low Thursday and a Friday, but we're kind of transitioning. We've been out sweeping streets when we can and doing some brushing and stuff. We're gonna start getting into our summer activities. There's inlets and stuff to fix, stuff that we're finding. When you go out sweeping, sometimes you'll see where storm inlets, you'll have holes next to them, so that's starting to come to play. And we've got a storm sewer project we're gonna get started with down the line here on Normandy Street between Hughes and Foothill. Put some storm sewer in there, nothing too big, and just kind of keep gearing up for summer and eventually ease into it. Basically, kind of just in the middle of it. One of the things, we purchased a Veritech VV600 brine maker. So it was on the Wisconsin Surplus online auction. It came from Dunn County Highway Department. And I think we got a pretty good deal. We paid like $1,400 for it. They've been around for a while. It's a 2015 model. We had these back when I was at the Highway Department. They're actually a pretty simple operation. They will work perfect for what we're gonna need as far as salt brine. So we didn't have to spend a lot of money on something, and I think we got a pretty good product. Dunn County was getting rid of it because Wisconsin DOT bought them a fancier system because they have Highway 94 running through Dunn County, and they like to use a lot of different, they use more blended mixes where salt brine is adequate for what we're gonna be doing. We don't need to be getting too carried away with other things, so that was kind of fun. Yeah, we're starting to clean out some of the shop too, going through some stuff up here where eventually we move into the new building. There's old parts and things that they're finding that we'll probably be getting rid of. Doing some maintenance on our other tractors and stuff, getting ready for summer. Other than that, trying to keep up with patching. The rain's really been a killer. We're out today. Tomorrow we're gonna be patching and try and get as much done before the next monsoon. It's Wednesday into Thursday. It sounds like we're supposed to get an inch plus. As far as frost in the roads, I stay in contact with the Highway Department, Marathon County, and the heavy soils. There was 5 feet total of frost in the roads this winter. The top 2.5 feet is out as of last week. There was still 2+ feet of frost down below. If you go drive the heavier soil roads like Birch Street, or even I was down on Jones on the south side of Weston today, a granite road, it's still heaved really bad. So we've been holding the weight limit pretty tight as far as giving out permits for people to run, especially on the heavier roads. We're trying to keep the weights down so they're not damaging anything, and we've been pretty successful. So we need some dry weather and some warm weather to try and knock the rest of that frost out and kind of get us to where we can start doing things. As far as even grading some of the granite roads, it's just, you can't even grade them right now. So just kind of keep up with everything. Get ready for the next projects.
Good question. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
We got this telephone box, which telephone company, they don't use it anymore. This green box. Some,
In the right of way, you mean the pedestals?
yeah, and the wire falling down from it, or they're open. Why they're not removing it?
If it's Frontier, and it is Frontier, they, I don't know if they are bankrupt yet, but they're real close. And Frontier's been in trouble for a while. You can call them, you can beg them, and I don't think they have the people, the resources where the things need to be fixed.
I don't think we have to beg him or even ask him a question. I think we can tell him to move it. That's our right of way.
Yeah. The utilities have a pretty strong, I guess, authority to be in the right of way.
Yeah, Michael, I'll work with them too. The gas company, when we were putting the storm pipe in Mesker,
Yep.
we asked him to move the gas line from one side to the other side. He said, well, you pay for it, I do it. I said, we're not gonna pay for it, then we're gonna move it. And he did move it.
Yeah.
That's the law.
Yep. Yeah, but I mean, to tell them you've got wires hanging out, you need to clean it up.
But they're not using it. It's not usable to them.
I don't know about that. Hushain, we hit one with a mower a year ago out on Weston Avenue, almost by County Highway J. They wrapped a plastic bag around it and it sat for a year before they finally came around and fixed it again. And WPS, they're good. Power and Gas, I know those people personally, they're engineers up there. They'll come out and take care of things. It's Frontier is the one that you can beg, holler. They just have a tough time getting stuff done.
One of my neighborhood, my only suggestion would be this, is it's a cheap, easy, and sometimes very effective. You send them a certified letter, but make sure it's certified and tell them about the hazard and that you're notifying, putting them on notice that if they do not correct it, they will be held responsible for if there's any accident, injury, personal injury.
Gladly.
I did that with a cable company that I ran into a problem with, and it got fixed within 48 hours.
Okay.
And prior to that, they didn't care.
And
They got that certified letter and they gets their attention.
Do you have a specific location where you're seeing? I mean, I can't just send them a letter saying it's all over the place. Is there?
Right. Yeah, I would be specific.
Yeah,
They're all over on Ross Avenue at the corner of Mesker and Ross.
okay. I'll take a look at it.
Yes, as a matter of fact, a couple times, it was just wide open and I was wondering why. Then I see they're not using it and wherever they get that, because the wiring is pretty old and it's not usable to them.
I don't know for sure if it is or not. All I know is with Frontier, when I worked for the city of Wausau, they held up the Thomas Street project when they rebuilt Thomas Street from First Avenue going to 17th. They had the curb in, they had the whole road graded, and Frontier had their telephone poles sitting in the road. That was 3-4 years ago. They couldn't pave the road because they didn't have the things moved. When I was with the highway department, it was the same thing. I'm not making excuses. I'll gladly send them a certified letter, but don't hold your breath. That's all I can say.
We've had a lot of experience with Frontier over the year.
They're terrible.
Could accidentally dig it out. They would be leaving wire strung, just hung on fence lines and things for 2 years before they buried it like they said they were gonna do. I mean, they have not been responsive on things, and yeah, as Michael says, they have under statute all this authority or rights, to use right of way, and we can't necessarily even tell them where to go.
I think we should start communication at least with them. And let's see where we go with it.
I'll try the certified letter route and we'll see where it goes. I'm all for that because it is our right of way, but I just historically, I know we've had trouble. City of Wausau up on 6th Street, when I was with them, there were manholes there, go up north on 6th Street. They're gonna finally rebuild that piece of road this year. I called them, I begged them, we did everything else we could, and we just finally went and patched over the manholes because they were low.
We have a couple of those on Alderson Street by Target that we've just put asphalt over because they wouldn't come and adjust their manholes up, so.
We'll let you know next meeting how it works out. Gotta have a challenge.
Utility operation update?
Yeah, March was dominated by PFAS, but outside of that, our operators, there's been an uptick in some of our diggers hotline locates, work orders. Our SCADA is currently being worked on with AECom getting designed. On the water side of things, the guys been able to take a lot of time just doing some miscellaneous well maintenance on some of the feed lines and some of the scales. Mentioned that our PFAS sample collection was conducted on the 2nd of March. Results came back mid-month and went from there with discussions with DNR and everybody. Our sewer side of stuff, we have a sewer lining project that MyTech's gonna be starting up on. We're currently trying to get the stretch from Meadow Rock on Camp Phillips, going from Meadow Rock down to Shorey and Shorey over to Bushka. We're gonna be lining that portion of our sanitary, so our guys are currently cleaning and televising it to get that tape, the video over to MyTech to review prior to lining. Some of the miscellaneous stuff, I guess PFAS again, I had mentioned that we took our second round of samples today. So our first round of samples that was collected early March was method 537.1, which brings in 18 compounds. Then you pick and choose in there which ones are kind of calculated into some of the numbers that Angel was touching on in there. So this Wisconsin 33 actually incorporates a few other ones that will add a little more potentially to, it looks at 4 additional compounds that aren't looked at with the method 537.1. So we'll see if that makes any impact to some of our other wells as well. The guys also ran, like I mentioned, well 4 in particular to kind of see what we could dial it down to and see what kind of pressures we had should we get our short-term treatment put in there. We also took 7 5-gallon carboys of water that we're sending down to AECOM lab in Texas, where they'll be doing some analysis to determine what type of media best be used in there. We today discussed potentially starting up some of our valve exercising work. Not sure if that's a good thing or not with some of the issues we may have with some of our modeling that we're trying to do for diverting some of our distribution water into blending with well 4. I guess Michael touched on most of our contract work. I guess a couple other items, our Tanya Tricia lift station resumed, and some of the wiring was getting done today. And talking with Pember, the contractor, they said we should probably start discussions about a startup on that. So we'll probably be getting with our engineer to set up a day where we can maybe get a startup on that new lift station. Other items, I'll be sending out our hydrant painting RFP hopefully this week. I talked with Visu Sewer, who was awarded our manhole rehab project last year, that they couldn't get to it on their schedule. They said they'd be getting to us probably May, so that should be on our schedule, hopefully coming up soon. Then I mentioned MyTech with our sewer lining work. Then the rest of it, we have our customers added for last month, and then our water pump trends and wastewater flows, lift station hours, then our Aquahawk usage.
So that sewer line, you just give it to them or it was a bid?
No, it was bid.
What was
A
the
while
bid
ago.
result?
The one for Visu Sewer?
Yeah.
Yeah, we brought that.
No, for MyTech
Slip
sewer
lining?
lining.
Yeah, so we had a couple quotes for, I guess, the engineering services, and then we'll be putting that project out to bid
Yeah.
for a contractor to actually perform the work.
Yeah, they won the design, I should have said, yes.
Yes, so my tech is doing the lining design, and then that project will be bid out for lining with the various contractors out there.
Various contractors. Michael is, as far as I know, is the only one.
Yeah, but I mean, there are other companies that do, like Great Lakes Televising, they line sewers, Visu Sewer line sewers, there are other lining companies out there.
Okay. Any question? All right. All this discussion on recommendation. Item 9, well number 4, PFAS bench testing proposal. What's your wishes? Michael, you have to add anything to it?
Yeah, I guess, Angel pretty much covered what the purposes of this, to kind of evaluate what is the best removal method for the PFAS based on our water. It's not a one size fits all, so you have to look at the various, filter medias out there and see which one is most successful at treating the water that we have here. They'll look at granulated activated carbon as well as ion exchange as part of the process so that, and again, I think Angel, you said it, take it down, we're looking at trying to get to 0. So if that standard comes back and it's, 10 or 5 or, whatever the number is, we know, hey, we can treat our water to this level at least.
So, yeah, and as we said at the end of the presentation, I think this is the thing we should do. At this point, we have authorized them to begin. We collected samples, they're being sent to Texas and so forth. So we have two choices, I guess, or choices, I suppose, is how we fund this ourselves without knowing if we're gonna have outside funding. I guess one is that we do have a budget in the utility, operation for engineering studies. The other thing we could do is you could recommend to the board that we, consider using some of our American Rescue and Recovery Plan Act allocation, to pay for this if we don't have any other source of funding through other grants, from the state, for instance, or from the federal government, if somehow what we have authorized to be spent here or planned to authorize in fiscal year 2022, which would be this engineering studies, it would not be covered by this grant source I mentioned earlier. That was also part of that application, was indicating what we had authorized in 2022.
So you already applied for a grant, right?
Well, through Senator Baldwin's office, or through the Senate anyway, I guess, from additional appropriations, I guess. So we'll see where that goes. I said there's no guarantees. In the meantime, I guess you have to, just to know that we do have a source through our normal utility budgeting. And that's, which has been adopted for the year. But you could also consider, as we recommend us to the board, that they consider using some of the ARPA funds for this particular work.
I think we should recommend it to the board. I don't think we can authorize it to use the budget without board authorization.
Do you really need our direction on how it's funded? I mean, is that a decision that can be made by staff or by the board itself, or?
Well, ultimately, it's gonna be the board, but if the committee would like to make a recommendation, it'd be helpful, I think.
Yeah, I think board need our recommendation. Now, what they make a decision is up to them, but we have to make a recommendation.
I'm certainly in favor of approving it and having move forward with the expenditure.
Is that your motion?
How it gets funded, I guess. Yeah, I mean, my recommendation to the board would be wherever the free money is, we'll get it.
Prefer to get a grant where it comes, and if not, we have.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the advice we were given is, keep track of your invoices, receipts, and there may be a chance to get reimbursed for costs expended, so.
I'll make a motion to recommend the village board approve a contract with AECOM, the bench scale treatability study for PFAS removal for well 4 for an amount not to exceed $45,744. And that the board consider whatever cost mitigation grants might be available.
I second.
Discussion? Nate, are you there?
He's still online.
Yeah, I can see his phone there. Okay, if there's no question or discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I have it, thank you. Item 10, 2022 Schofield Avenue pavement maintenance, Lasker to Ryan. Michael?
Yeah, so I guess part of the 2022 street maintenance, I guess, program, we're looking at concrete joint replacements. We had a bid opening last 2 weeks ago. And we had two bidders on the project, Norcon Corporation and Pember. Norcon was the low bidder at $123,440, compared to Pember at $222,17. So I mean, it's almost double.
Yeah, I was wondering how. I would look at all the number, that's significant difference, but that's what he wants to do.
Yeah, so I guess our recommendation is to move forward with Norcon. Between our Our concrete repairs for the street maintenance budget, we had 130,000, so they're, estimated cost of 123,440 fits within what we had budgeted for that work, so. And to clarify, it would be from Mesker out to Ryan, so kind of this stretch of Schofield Ave. Primarily, there's a lot of bad spots, kind of over by Teagan and Old Costa, so.
What about the rest of it? We got some problem in that area also.
We do. I guess, we're trying to work within what monies we have available. So next year, we probably look at, strategically, if we look at, eastbound lanes and maybe start westbound coming back this way. And then next year, if we have other spots from Camp Phillips coming this way, we can do those. Unless you want us to try to do more, I guess we just need to.
Well, you probably gotta drive it. You already drive it to see the condition of it, how it is.
I've got it logged all the way from Camp Phillips out. So
We're talking about from Business 51 to Mesker.
Yeah, so from Business 51 to Birch Street, we kind of, I guess that's where we talked about putting Schofield Ave as a grant project out there, reconstructing that in a few years. Because we're gonna keep chasing that section in particular. So I guess getting that as part of the capital improvement plan helps us know, okay, we can do the temporary fixes as they come up, but we're not gonna invest our major maintenance dollars in that section of roadway anymore. We'll focus on keeping the rest of this in good shape so we don't, how do you wanna put it? So you don't just kind of throw your money at issues and then all of a sudden you got everything going poorly versus just a known section that you're gonna focus on getting reconstructed in the near term. If you follow that. So.
Still, I think we got a problem with that.
Yeah, and if those things come up, we talked about if we need to cut it out and put a, kind of an asphalt patch in it for a few years, it's not a long-term solution, but it would be a less costly, kind of short-term patch.
I move to award the 2022 Schofield Ave concrete repair project to Norcon Corporation based on their unit prices on the attached bid tab for the estimated total price of $123,440.
I'll second.
Discussion? Nate? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I have it, thank you.
This is a point of order. Should we, I guess, list him as an abstention or how should we? Or his vote?
Abstention.
It's a no vote.
Yep.
No vote.
Yeah, if he doesn't vote, that's it. Right. That's, the phone is there, that's what I ask, I have to ask him.
Yeah, no, I think we should.
Okay, item 11, Oswald Court Planner purchase. Yeah,
Yeah, sorry. This is since we bought the new skid steer last year, it's got a high flow kit on it. It's a track machine. It's got rubber tracks on it. We rented a milling head, a cold planer is what they call it, last year and used it. There's a definite need for it in places. If you go drive Jelnik from Business 51 coming back, some of the areas where we're having the stripping issues, this is a unit that's 24 inches wide. We can set her down, mill out those bad spots. We have the hot box patch trailer. We go down to RC, get some hot mix and take and put it in and we can do a permanent patch that's gonna last a long time. You'll see there's some pictures. We did some work. Actually, 2 years ago, we did a little bit on Ross Avenue, but it's a piece of equipment that definitely would get used. This is just lane wedging. Oh, there was milled out there too, some of it, I guess. But I think you look at the rental costs nowadays, for what it costs us to rent a piece of equipment like that, I know $25,000 is a lot of money, but it is, if it's maintained, it's something that'll last us a long time. We had two of them at the,
Forever, won't it?
pardon?
Those things last just about forever, don't they?
As long as you take care of them and our guys are good at maintaining things. It's a good versatile piece of equipment that will come in handy.
And I have some questions.
In favor of it, I don't know what I mean. I'll move to recommend the village board approve the purchase of the CAT asphalt pool cleaner mill from Fabric for a purchase price of $24,500.
A second,
I'll second.
discussion. No discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I have it, thank you. Asphalt water purchase,
Yeah, so I guess this one kind of goes with the mill. Once you mill it out and you put the asphalt in, you need something to, roll it and compact it. So I guess, again, we got quotes from, two of the local, equipment dealers. Low quote was from Fabic, Cat at $29,731. We initially had an estimated cost of this piece of equipment at $35,000, so it's a little over $5,000 less.
what's the weight of it?
What's up? It is. 4,000 pounds.
With the water?
That's the operating weight, so yeah, probably.
It's about 40, a 40-inch drum, I believe, on it. Is it 40 or 48?
It's a 39.4.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thanks.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
Unlike the previous item, I see this one, your rental for last year was a little less than $2,000 for the year. Is that about standard rental cost for each year, or is it, I mean, obviously it's highs and lows, but.
Yeah, last year was the first year. I think last year was the year when our, whatever, 1970s Aero, 1988, I guess it is.
She's vintage.
That one finally went out. I can't remember what month it was, but so I think we did use the old one a little bit last year, and then when it finally was no longer salvageable, we then start renting it. So my guess is it probably would be, probably maybe $2,000 more a year if we were renting it throughout the whole summer. So, and again, the one we had from 1988 lasted, what, 30 years? More than 30, so,
Chad?
If you go around, drive like off of Hilgeman and down here on the other side of Schofield Avenue, the city of Wausau borrowed us a piece of wedging equipment that goes on the skid steer that we used. So it's another something where it's not just gonna be with the mill, where we'll be using a roller, we'd also be trying to do more wedging. The more we can do in-house with this stuff, the better it is. We've got RCs close by, American is in, we've got the hot mix, we just, a couple of tools, and instead of giving the money away on rental and take care of it, that thing will last 20 years. Same with that milling head.
I looked at that. Those are very long-lived machines.
All right, what's your wish?
Make a motion
Go ahead.
to recommend the village board approve the purchase of Cat asphalt roller from Fabic for a purchase price of $29,731.
Is there a second? Second.
CIP.
Discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I have it. Item 13, Church Street Special Assessment Meeting. Michael?
all right. So the bid opening for this project is this coming Wednesday. I guess once I get the bid costs together, I'd be putting together the preliminary special assessment report. I guess the main question I maybe have is, I'd be looking to follow what we did with Apache Lane. There is one house has main already fronting it. We'd be looking to install the lateral, so I guess that house, we'd just be looking at the lateral assessment, maybe not the main assessment. So I guess just maybe before the meeting, just making sure that we're in agreement there, or we think, hey, if you're connected to the water system, you should still pay for a nominal piece of main. But that I think I have a map in here. It'd be easier to explain this stuff. So this,
Size of that main, Michael?
it's an 8-inch, so it's nothing oversized. It's just a traditional 8-inch main. So the water main that was installed on Birch Street up here for the Windmer Oak subdivision, and primarily these houses on the west side of the road, is in existence. So there is one house on this star that has existing main in front of it, but no connection. So I guess I'd be looking to add laterals, for that one, so in the future, we're not digging up a road in case they want to connect. And then the rest of the ones on the east side of the road there, or the bottom side of the screen, are all properties for the Denyon subdivision that's going in. Those ones I know will have uses. This star up here, that one fits that mold of, an older house looking to connect. So then the other question is, this property is just shy of a full, 40 frontage. It's one house existing. There is room for probably, 4 or 5 additional houses in the future. But similar to Apache though, we only are so Weston Avenue, what we were proposing is, they'd only get the one assessment based on that. And then if it, divides in the future, if there's other connections, they would then pay an assessment at that time. So I guess it just concurring that is still the framework we want to go into and utilize for, I guess, this project as well. I think for consistency, it makes sense, but I don't want to surprise anybody if that's what we do too. And
So this is the same as what we did previously.
it would be, it'd be the same as the Apache and what we were proposing at the Weston Avenue. Yep. The only odd part is that one house that has frontage on a main already, but not laterals onto their property.
Was that lot ever assessed anything?
It wasn't because the developer put that main in. So I think at that time, if they wanted to connect, they would have paid the developer a fee for it.
There was a sunset on that though of 10 years.
Correct.
So that time's passed.
So the lot benefited then just by,
It's benefited by not connecting for, 20 years. I don't know what the
that's the
leaking.
one that bothers me. I mean,
Right.
if I was somebody else, that would be, the thought would go through my head if I knew,
Yeah,
oh, well, what if I just sit back and do nothing for 10 years? Do I get it for free?
yeah.
If the developer does it, but if the village does it, we would
Right.
assess it, and we, if the
Okay.
assessments
Has this situation come up in the past?
comes up occasionally.
And was there a precedent? Is there anything we did in the? I know that's a tough question to answer.
Well, you have the same situation out on Riverbend Road.
Yeah, and in that case, when people have built after the fact, they weren't assessed, but they incurred all the costs to dig up the road and connect to the mains. And repave the
This
road.
lot would too then, correct?
So I guess that would, I mean, I guess we kind of taking the stance of we're at least putting laterals there. So at a minimum, I'd say, there should be an assessment for the laterals. The question is, do we factor in any charge for the main frontage, or do we say that's lucky you've had that main there? I don't know.
Yeah, this is where the Public Service Commission comes in on the board. Collect the capital contribution on something that's been installed and, over 10 years ago. That recapture agreement language.
Okay,
I just want to make sure we're consistent.
Yeah.
I guess is
Try to be.
And I don't know how many situations
this happens.
this would really happen to.
I don't think we have to take any action on this.
No, and I guess that's how, I guess I'll just let you know, that's how I'll be putting the report together. And if there's discussion at the meeting that we want to look at modifying it, we can do that. And then I guess the other thought is, I'd be looking to probably schedule that assessment meeting then either the last week of this month or the first week in May. So I'm not sure what anybody's availability is, or if we want to try to just hold it as part of the Public Works meeting in May.
Oh, yeah, make it easier. Just
Yeah,
part of
I will
the-
not be available last weekend in April. Yeah, I will be.
Yeah, I just put it with that meeting.
It's fine.
You just try to hold it with the meeting? Okay.
I think as long as we're consistent with what we just done,
Yep.
maybe someone is upset, but if you're consistent, I don't know how.
Sure.
Too much.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, the water sewer
I
aspect.
prefer it to be held with the regular meeting as well.
Okay. All right, we'll go with that.
All right, item 6, next meeting dates. A, to be arranged, Devon Birch Street Special Assessment. B, Monday, May 9th, 2022 at 4:30 PM. C, Monday, June 13th, 2022 at 4:30 PM. And D, Monday, July 11th, 2022 at 4:30 PM. Item 7, topic for future meetings. Don't have any. Remark from administrator, Mr. Donner.
Nothing more.
I have a quick question for the administrator. I know you were talking to the Village of Corona Order about East Nick Avenue or reaching out to them about that. Has there been a meeting yet or any conversations about that?
There's been a few, we've been trying to get a meeting with, staff and the two chief elected officials. I did talk to Richard Downey, their administrator today. And, I was gonna resend a, kind of an outline of what we were expecting as far as an intergovernmental agreement on the maintenance or construction and maintenance of East Nick, the existing parts of it. So I guess I'll do that this week, and if we can make some progress, it's one of those things that we've had, no agreement, no written agreement. It's not unusual that we don't have written agreements with neighbors on some of these existing streets, the border streets. But we've always seemed to work things out with like Rothschild and Schofield and even on past with Cronin, but for whatever reason, they haven't been willing to come together on this one, but we're gonna keep trying.
And I drove down there yesterday and I see there's a road closed sign just past that last house. Has that been there for a while or was that?
Couple weeks.
Okay.
Says local traffic only.
Yeah, the frost out.
They have been, I did notify Mr. Downey that we were not gonna be doing emergency maintenance out there right now during frost out, and if there was gonna be any such maintenance needed, they would have to take care of that. That was based on the board's action at our last meeting.
Anything else from Mr. Donner? Remark from staff? Michael?
I'm good.
Yeah. Josh?
I mean, I guess if you guys encounter any questions about PFAS, please direct them to us so we can maybe limit some of the unknowns because there's enough unknowns as it is. So try to direct it towards us.
Towards Josh.
Towards me.
Steve, we gotta talk about iron and manganese removal.
Yep. That's still in the works. The PFAS kind of.
Jump to the front line.
Yeah. It delayed getting some other water related things out last month, but we'll get back on track there.
Okay, thank you. Remark from committee member? None? Thank you. No announcement? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
to adjourn.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.